They buried the message inside the AU, not beneath concrete, but beneath contracts. The drums were not broken, they were bribed into silence. And when the ancestors cried out from under the bones of Ouagadougou, their voices were redacted in the name of regional alignment. I speak not as a career diplomat. I speak as a son of the soil entrusted with a burden, the head of state of Burkina Faso, carrying the cries of the forgotten on my back. My tongue is not trained in Geneva. It was sharpened in the fields where Sankara once walked barefoot and unbought. I do not come bearing apologies or proposals. I come with fire. And I name the traitor without trembling. The African Union has become a gatekeeper for foreign masters, guarding colonial interests in African dialects. When I addressed the Union, I carried a message not written by consultants, but written in blood, memory, and thunder. It was not political, it was spiritual. A call for economic rupture, not reform. A call to cut the colonial umbilical cord disguised as development cooperation. But they blocked it, they silenced it, not with bullets, but with timelines, decorum, and diplomatic scheduling. They said it was too radical. They said it needed review. They said it could threaten stability, as if our poverty is not already the most violent instability on this continent. This is what they fear, a voice not processed through Paris, not formatted for Washington approval. A voice that reminds Africa that sovereignty is not negotiable, and that any union that fears that word is already enslaved. The African Union has become a stage. The actors wear Ankara, but the scripts are faxed from abroad. They became a gatekeeper for foreign masters, guarding colonial interests in African dialects. They sang praises when they eliminated Muammar Gaddafi, because they knew the obstacle was gone. The man who dared to dream of a gold-backed African currency, the man who spoke of a unified defense, one passport, one banking system. He was not just killed, he was betrayed. And the Union clapped. They host peace talks while foreign soldiers patrol our skies. They issue joint declarations while our children drink debt through every glass of water. They parade African ownership. But the ownership documents are stamped by IMF auditors. They say we must engage with partners. But tell me, what kind of partner brings you aid in one hand and signs your military agreements with the other? What kind of brotherhood demands compliance before cooperation? Let us speak clearly. They teach us to chase aid like it's oxygen, yet call it growth, when we breathe without their loans. Our budgets are calibrated by men who've never smelled African rain. Our growth is defined by spreadsheets that bleach out our pain. Why bleed in clinics with no gauze, while the consultants write prescriptions priced in consultancy fees? They strip our hospitals bare, then praise fiscal discipline. But the worst betrayal, it is the silence, the sacred silence of a union that refuses to say the word sovereignty without footnotes. The silence of those who watched as I stood to speak and looked away. The silence of a body meant to carry the voices of a billion souls, now reduced to a diplomatic buffer between Africa and her own awakening. Still, the message lives. It lives in the drumbeats of resistance, in the palm of every farmer who plants without subsidy, in the eyes of every youth who codes from cafes in Nairobi, without a line of Western credit. This microphone is not theirs. It is Africa's, and I will use it to say what they buried. Africa does not need permission to be free. And any union that fears that sentence fears its own people. They do not drop bombs anymore. They drop budgets and call it peace. They no longer arrive with bayonets. They arrive with laptops, armed with spreadsheets and policy prescriptions. And when we resist, they do not invade. They downgrade us. Junk status. High risk. Fiscal indiscipline. These are their modern weapons. Brothers and sisters, let me say this plainly. Debt is the new occupation. The old colonizer took our land. The new one leases our future with interest. They offer us loans with smiles, but hide the shackles in the fine print. They speak of development goals, while placing the chains of conditionality around our ministries. Their grants are gospel, spoken from World Bank pulpits. And the African Union, they echo those gospels like choir boys trained in Western seminaries. We are told to be creditworthy, but to whom? To those who stole our resources and now sell us back dignity at 12% interest. To institutions that loan us dollars backed by nothing, while we export gold, cobalt, lithium, backed by blood, backed by bone. This is the robbery no one wants to name. We export diamonds and import toothpicks. Our hands dig treasure, but our shelves stay bare. They say we must privatize, liberalize, downsize. But they never say what they themselves did to grow. They want our clinics run like startups, our water sold like stock. And when we say no, they threaten to cut aid, delay disbursement, or cancel debt talks. What kind of aid is withdrawn when a people choose dignity? What kind of development punishes sovereignty? Let me show you the system first. They create the crisis through resource control, currency manipulation, and overpriced imports. Then they offer relief, packaged as structural adjustment, always with a knife beneath the ribbon. And when you sign, they own your ministries, your budgets, your very future. They want us to trade their USD in cash while they wire their futures through invisible crypto rails. They demand we peg our currencies to theirs, yet print trillions we can never touch. They digitalize their economies while we still wait for loans to build roads. Meanwhile, our youth are told to innovate. But how do you code on empty stomachs? How do you build fintech in a country where 60% of the population can't access electricity? Still, our people do. Still, our people rise. Still, from the mechanic in Ibadan to the coder in Kigali, we build not just roads but revolutions. In Burkina Faso, we no longer chase budget support from those who poisoned our wells. We no longer celebrate aid packages that come wrapped in audits and blueprints that serve their investors, not our people. And this must be understood across Africa. They bleed us in the mines, then lend us our own blood in packages called loans. 1,000 ministries with balance sheets, but no clinics, no clean water, no power. The African Union sits in rooms with these financiers and calls it strategic dialogue. But dialogue that does not end in freedom is just a polite form of colonization. No more. We do not want their handouts soaked in interest, nor their rescue missions delivered by drones. We want our reparative wealth, our sovereign budgets, our unmortgaged futures. Because this is the truth, Africa is not poor, it is pillaged. We are not behind, we are being held back. The world order was not built. It was scripted, and Africa was written as the footnote. They say global cooperation, but we were never at the table. We were on the menu. And when we tried to rise, when Gaddafi dreamed of a gold-backed African dinar, they erased him. Not just from Libya, but from the very economic memory of the continent. This is not about failed governance. This is about rigged governance. A system that sends our ministers to beg in Washington, while Swiss accounts swell with African gold. A system where the rules were written in Bretton Woods, without a single African seated. Do you think it's coincidence that the World Trade Organization praises open markets only when it opens ours? That the G7 speaks of responsible investment, but its companies never pay fair tax? That our sovereign credit is rated by Western agencies trained to see risk in melanin? We are punished for our poverty, but our poverty is manufactured. They write laws in Geneva that govern our wombs in Accra. Ghost signature shaping futures without a fingerprint from our people. They call that global governance. I call it economic occupation in silk suits. What of Africom? They say it ensures peace. But tell me, who gave the order to fly drones over Sahel villages? Who funds intelligence operations in sovereign capitals yet calls it support? These are not alliances. These are traps set beneath the carpet of diplomacy. When our governments resist, they are sanctioned. When our presidents disobey, they are replaced. And when the people rise, when the farmers march, when the youth rebel, the Western media writes scripts titled Instability, while ignoring that the true chaos lives in offshore accounts, not our streets. Let me show you how the system works. We extract cobalt from the belly of Congo. It is sold in global markets denominated in dollars. That revenue is captured through foreign trade terminals. The profit is taxed offshore. And we borrow back that same wealth as aid. Why export diamonds and import toothpicks? Our hands dig treasure, but our shelves stay bare. They say Africa must integrate. But integrate into what? A global economy where our role is to supply, not succeed. To mine but never manufacture. To produce raw cocoa while Belgium sells chocolate as luxury. That is not trade. That is modern feudalism dressed in G20 branding. Our people suffer not from lack of effort, but from orchestrated exclusion. In every village, a weaver, a carpenter, a coder, a farmer, barred from prosperity by invisible algorithms. They sell us paper maps while they move through the world in data and code, owning nations with algorithms, not armies. And when we speak of liberation, they call us populists. When we build our own platforms, they say we are unstable. When we ask for our stolen reserves back, they say now is not the time. But let this be heard: Africa will no longer wait for invitations to its own freedom. We are not stakeholders. We are the owners of the soil. We will not digitize dependency. We will engineer sovereignty. We will not be ruled by global systems that fear our unity more than our poverty. So let it be more than our poverty. We are not anti-global. We are anti-submission. And any world order that demands our obedience but denies our dignity must fall. We will not be remembered for how long we begged, but for when we began to build. No more waiting for budget approvals signed in French. No more hunger charts designed in Brussels. We are the generation of the hammer, not the handout. In Burkina Faso, we have no illusions left. We know that freedom does not come in grants. It is grown like millet, stubborn and slow, but ours. We do not speak the language of reform. We speak the dialect of rupture. So here is what we choose. We choose to feed ourselves, not with wheat dumped from Europe, but with yam pulled from ancestral soil. We choose to power our cities, not with conditional electricity, but with solar grids built by local minds. We choose to govern ourselves, not with recycled constitutions approved abroad, but with blueprints born in tradition and tech. They will call this unrealistic. But what is unrealistic about building factories that match our minds? We will build factories with our hands, not wait for handouts priced in interest. For decades we exported cotton raw. Now we spin, we sew, we distribute. This is not resistance, it is resurrection. Let them keep their consultancy models. We are building economic models shaped by our reality: communal land, youthful populations, digital hunger, spiritual clarity. They sell us paper maps while they move through the world in data and code, owning nations with algorithms, not armies. We will write new maps, digital, sovereign and rooted. We are not afraid of the fourth industrial revolution. We are building it in Bambara, in Yoruba, in Swahili. Yes, our cloud servers will speak African tongues. Our fintech will not be built to funnel profits to Zurich. It will be designed to let a mother in Ouagadougou pay her daughter's school fees instantly. No permission required. We do not need permission to bank. We need infrastructure to build. They said crypto was for criminals. But who are the real criminals? Those who move Bitcoin, or those who move trillions out of Nigeria, Congo, Zimbabwe into offshore holes. We embrace digital emancipation, not as fashion, but as survival. Our identities must be sovereign. Our transactions must be free of surveillance. Our wealth must be encrypted against theft, foreign or domestic. This is not a utopia. This is a blueprint already unfolding. In Kigali, code flows from youth-run labs. In Bamako, women's co-ops are digitizing distribution. In Bobo-Dioulasso, solar cooperatives have replaced the darkness left by decades of donor promises. They wanted us to compete globally while tied to colonial legacies. We now choose economic disobedience. We will grow what we eat. We will mine what we use. We will code what we need. We will trade in currencies backed by value, not violence. The AU said we needed more integration, but integration without independence is surrender in slow motion. We will integrate, but on the spine of sovereignty, not servitude. Let every nation across this continent know we are not asking who will let us rise. We are asking who will stop us. Because the rebirth has no headquarters. It breathes in Accra and Addis, in Lagos and Lusaka. Not in reports, but in revolt. Not in metrics, but in movement. Not in compliance, but in creation. Power does not trickle down, it rises up. From the red soil under a farmer's fingernails. From the shrill cry of a newborn placed in a midwife's arms. From the rhythmic tap of sewing machines in Accra backrooms, stitching clothes the AU will never wear. That is where the revolution lives. Not in policy briefings, but in practice. They say our people are uneducated. But who taught the grandmother to track planting seasons without a calendar? Who taught the boy to assemble a radio from spare parts, or the girl to fix code on a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen? They are not underdeveloped. They are undervalued. From the mechanic in Ibadan to the coder in Kigali, we build not just roads, but revolutions. We don't need foreign advisors to tell us what dignity looks like. Dignity is a fisherman who can feed his family without selling his river to a multinational. Dignity is a woman who can give birth in a clinic that has water, light, and no debt ledger on its wall. This is the new face of African power, the seamstress who creates wealth with needle and thread, the herbalist who heals when imported medicine is priced out of reach, the youth who learns Python under candlelight and builds an app to track stolen land deeds. Our lands are sacred, but our deeds are missing. A village uprooted by a contract no elder ever signed. We will not let our mothers be made squatters on ancestral ground. No foreign investment justifies the erasure of our lineage. They told us to privatize everything, water, schools, even airwaves. But some things are not for sale. You cannot privatize identity. You cannot outsource courage. The time has come to unmask the lie of leadership. Leadership is not title. It is service. It is the youth in Port Harcourt organizing sanitation crews while politicians debate trash policy. It is the cooperatives in Mali feeding hundreds while ministries chase development targets they never reach. They say we must be globally competitive, but we say, be locally sovereign. Before we conquer markets, we must secure meaning. Before we export value, we must reclaim voice. Let us recenter the narrative. Africa does not need a savior, it needs a mirror. And when we look into it, we must see not what we lack, but what we are. The birthplace of rhythm, the forge of civilization, the soil where justice still grows wild. When left unchained, our enemies do not fear our guns. They fear our unity. They fear our capacity to organize ourselves without permission. They fear markets not controlled but cooperative. Nations not pacified but participatory. This is why every movement they cannot fund, they label a threat. Why every uprising they cannot explain, they call extremism. But we know what it is. It is truth finally clothed in the tongues of the people. Let it be said, the revolution will not be driven by elite manifestos. It will be steered by mothers at the waterline, by students with empty pockets but full clarity, by elders who remember when land meant something more than a title deed. Not every battle needs a bullet. Some need only a boundary. Some need only a refusal. Some need only a different way to measure worth. And so we rise, not in protest alone, but in presence, not with flags but with food, not in anger, but in unbought dignity. There will be no apology tour. There will be no waiting for signatures. This is not a request, it is a restoration, without permission. For too long, we were taught to beg for return, of our treasures, our voice, our future. But now we understand the ones who robbed us will never volunteer justice. Let the IMF keep their forecasts. We have our futures written in the stars, not spreadsheets. Africa is not in debt. Africa is the creditor. We lent the world our minerals, our people, our genius. We lent it through centuries of blood-soaked extraction. And now they bring us loans. They calculate our deficits, but never repay the debt of stolen children, shipped from Goree to Charleston, from Luanda to Kingston. They demand budget reforms, but never speak of the trillions in unpaid colonial back pay. What ledger accounts for that? The AU refuses to speak of this reckoning, because it fears being locked out of meetings where our erasure is agreed upon in silence. But we are not afraid. We speak not to gain favor, but to ignite fire. Africa will no longer beg for healthcare. It will build it with sovereign data, sovereign budgets, sovereign hands. Let no one misunderstand, sovereignty is not a slogan. It is infrastructure. It is refusing a USAID grant that requires rewriting your education system. It is rejecting a peacekeeping force that occupies more ground than it secures. It is choosing to stand alone rather than kneel in consensus. They told us be patient. But patience in the face of poison is betrayal. They told us be strategic. But strategy without soul is surrender by another name. So we unlearned their language. We now speak in the rhythm of revolution. The ancestors are not watching silently. They are screaming through the winds of Ouagadougou. They are crying in the thunderclouds above Nairobi. They are rising in the dreams of our children. Children who will never again be taught that Paris is a pinnacle. What they call political instability is spiritual clarity. What they call populism is memory returning. We are not dangerous because we are angry. We are dangerous because we remember. We remember Lumumba, fed to silence. We remember Sankara, betrayed by suits in our own colors. We remember Nkrumah, warned not to dream so loudly. And we remember Gaddafi, whose ghost still haunts every oil barrel they pretend we can't refine. So let it be said, across this land, the reckoning is not coming, it is already here. Every village reclaiming its seeds, every youth building code in dialect, every leader refusing debt diplomacy. They fear us not because of what we destroy, but because of what we build without them. And we are building everything: schools from stone, networks from scratch, nations from nothing but willpower and ancestral fire. There will be no final warning, no approval letter, no roundtable agreement. Only this, a microphone in the hands of the uninvited, a continent standing not for applause, but for ancestral accounting, and a voice rising from the Sahel to the sea, declaring Africa is not for sale, Africa is not a ward, Africa is not asleep, it is awake, and it will be free, not someday but now.